Welcome to the Leading Past Limits podcast. We share lessons learned from the hard-won experience of accomplished professionals who have placed service before self. I'm Kumar Kibble, an executive coach and the principal at GuideQuest, a leadership coaching company. I've been passionate about developing leaders since graduating from West Point more than 30 years ago, and have led high-performing teams as a military officer, special agent, diplomat, and senior executive. Join us in this episode featuring retired U.S. Army Major General Byron Bagby. He shares his journey from ROTC cadet to general officer, as well as his experiences in the corporate boardroom. Be sure to subscribe and don't miss out on lessons learned from the real-world School of Hard Knocks. Our guest today is retired Major General Byron Bagby. He's the managing partner of BMB Solutions, a consulting firm specializing in executive leadership development and coaching, as well as strategy development. General Bagby served over 33 years in the U.S. Army before retiring in 2011. His impactful career included molding cadets at West Point while serving on the faculty and staff, and that's where I met him and sought his mentorship as a young cadet with the desire to lead paratroopers in the 82nd Airborne, a trail he had already blazed in exemplary fashion. General Bagby went on to serve in numerous command and staff assignments, including at the Pentagon on the Joint Staff and on the Department of the Army staff. During his career, he held key positions, including Commandant of Joint Forces Staff College, Chief of the Office of Military Cooperation in Cairo, Egypt, and Director of Operations for the NATO Joint Force Command Brunsum. He currently serves on several corporate and advisory boards. General Bagby is a life member of the Veterans of Foreign Wars, and he's qualified as an Army Ranger and a Master Parachutist. Byron, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much, Kumar, and thanks for inviting me. And I know you've got a lot of options from whom you can select to invite, and inviting me means a lot. And thanks for what you've done for our great nation in uniform and the 82nd Airborne Division, what you've done in the Balkans, and as well as serving in Homeland Security and ICE and doing those difficult jobs that you were doing. So thank you very much for what you've done for our great country, Kumar.
Well, sir, thank you for that. It means a lot coming from you. I'll tell you that when I talked about the mentoring, as we discussed at breakfast a number of months ago, when I was getting ready to graduate, you'll recall I went around interviewing all of the tactical officers in the regiment and was looking for advice, and some of the perspective and the troop focused guidance you gave me served me well, and frankly served me well throughout my entire career. So I thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Well, so let's start at the beginning. What led you to pursue a military career?
Well, Kumar, you need to know that I grew up in a small town in Missouri, the same house where my parents lived, where my mom passed away a few years ago, same telephone number. So I didn't get to travel and see much of the world. And I decided to pursue a military career so I could lead people, so I could manage resources, and so I could see a large part of the world that I probably would not get to see in other professions. And I found it exciting. When I was in college as an undergraduate, I was in Army ROTC, and then talking with the cadre there and seeing what they did and learning from their experiences, that I thought that would be a very attractive field for me to go into. So I joined the military and became second lieutenant and served for almost 3.5 decades, but just a chance to lead, manage resources, and see a part of the world.
Yeah. And you mentioned being commissioned as a lieutenant. What was your first assignment? And what you mentioned going through the ROTC program. Would you share with us what prepared you for that role?
Well, I'll tell you, my first assignment was at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and a very, very special place with high standards. You've got to be physically fit no matter what your specialty is. You must be proficient at your duties tactically and technically. And I must tell you, I was lucky. I had a chance to go to airborne school and ranger school as a cadet. Back in those days, they gave very few slots to West Point cadets and ROTC cadets. And I qualified for one of those billets and was able to graduate. So I earned a Ranger tab as a cadet. And I think that going to Ranger school as my first military experience was challenging, but I found I liked it. And when I got to Fort Bragg, I fit right in with fitness and doing difficult, tough training. So I think that the cadre we had there at Westminster College, the ROTC cadre, taught me about leadership, and then having the confidence in me to send me to Ranger School as a cadet to come back with a tab that prepared me for the arduous duties at Fort Bragg, North Carolina.
That's an interesting. I did not remember that you had gone through Ranger School as a cadet. And the thing that's very striking about that many listeners will not know, is that leaves zero room for error, as I recall. You don't have the time to recycle as most people do at Ranger School. So that's also another impressive achievement.
That's correct. In the regular Army, you might be able to recycle one or two classes, but you're there for the summer as a cadet. And if you don't make it, well, you've got to come back and try again. But luckily, I didn't get hurt, and I was able to pass all the requirements and earn my Ranger tab successfully.
Yeah. And you mentioned it preparing you for the arduous assignment. What did you learn about leadership from that first assignment? Obviously you had studied principles, and you'd had the opportunity, I'm certain, to practice them as a cadet in various leadership assignments. But what did you learn specifically on active duty with troops?
Leadership is all about people. I don't care what sector you're leading in, whether it's a nonprofit organization, a university, a football team, or a Fortune 500 company, or a military unit. It comes down to people. And you understand people, you get to know them, understand what their challenges are, you develop them and help them improve in their duties and their personal life. So it became apparent to me, Kumar, early on in my time at Fort Bragg, that leadership, being a platoon leader, is all about people, learning about them, helping them understand how they play a role in the larger team. And that stayed with me throughout my entire career and beyond. And I use that today when I'm coaching leaders and on the boards I serve on. It's about people ultimately. So that 2-syllable word resonated with me at my first assignment at Fort Bragg, Kumar.
And what I know I found for my first assignment as a platoon leader at Bragg, the NCOs were just top notch. And in some respects, I placed myself in their hands as far as helping to mold, the type of lieutenant that they deserve.
People find it surprising, but the person who taught me the most about being a successful Army officer is the first sergeant I had. First Sergeant Craig Dalton, Vietnam veteran, master parachutist, even though it was an artillery unit, he had a CIB from Vietnam. He taught me about what it means to be an officer. He taught me how to train leaders. He taught me how to use NCOs to get them to maximize a unit's performance. And retired Command Sergeant Major Craig Dalton, then a first sergeant, he taught me how to be an officer. Taught me how to shine boots back in those days, which you had to do at Fort Bragg a lot. Had to look professional, but really a top quality NCO. And I must tell you, my plan was to do my 4 years in the Army, complete my obligation, and go to law school. I wanted to be an attorney. And I took the LSAT, scored very high, applied to 2 law schools, got into both of them. And Kumar, it came down to a 2-week period where I had to decide to either take my law school slot or stay in the Army. And the person that convinced me to stay in was First Sergeant Dalton. He talked to me, you'll be a good company commander. Why don't you stay in and long enough to command a company? And then if you decide to get out, that law school slot will still be there. But he's the reason why I became the officer that I did, is because he taught me and the other lieutenants in the artillery battery to be good officers. But he's the one that had the most profound effect on me.
What led to that effect? Like, what made you respect and trust him so much? What were his features of his character or his investment in you? Would you share a little bit more about that?
He would listen. The battery commander would tell us to do something, and then you're on your own to figure it out. And we'd go to him and say, "Hey, Top, how do we do this?" And he would coach you, say, "Go see the supply sergeant, put in a request for a range or ammunition or whatever it might be." But he would coach you, listen to what your problem was, and give you ways to mitigate the impact of some negative outcome. But he would listen. And a lot of people don't listen. But he would listen to you and then help you solve whatever your challenge was and help you get the job done. But he connected with myself and other lieutenants in the company and developed all of us. And, we stayed in contact until he passed away about 15 years ago or so, but really a top quality non-commissioned officer.
Yeah. Yeah. And they are so instrumental in forming lieutenants. I just recently reconnected with First Sergeant Warren Christopher, who was the top, he was first sergeant in my company and hard as woodpecker lips.
That's right. That's right.
You had referenced kind of, the tough challenges in terms of in that first assignment. And obviously throughout your career, you faced difficulties and I'm certain setbacks, as we all do. How do you remain resilient during adversity?
Well, the first thing I will tell you is my 5 core values are efficiency, independence, learning, diversity, and resilience. Those are my 5 core values that guide me and have the last 10 or 15 years. So resilience being one of them, I try to create coping strategies and share with others. That's the leadership behavior that causes my core value of resilience to come alive. That's how I live that particular value. And I spend time trying to understand what the issue is first and identify what the problem is, what's the obstacle, what adverse action is going on that I need to correct. And then I implement some kind of coping strategy to navigate that way. And that's my resilience mechanism. But one of my core values is resilience, and its supporting leadership behavior is create coping strategies and share with others. But I spend time trying to identify what the problem is and then work toward identifying a strategy to work around that particular issue.
And let me ask you about that because, and this is from the standpoint of just communication, because I've read about Admiral Stockdale and his time at the Hanoi Hilton for 7 years in Vietnam and the social tap code that they use to maintain social relationships. But one of the things that Jim Collins featured in his business book, Good to Great, was the Stockdale paradox. And Stockdale talked about when he was asked who made it out and who didn't. And he said, that's easy, the optimists. But what he meant by that were the ones that said, oh, we'll be out by Christmas. And then Christmas came and went and they're still there. Oh, we'll be out by Easter. He said the ones that really kind of got through it were ones that faced the brutal facts and designed strategies to deal with that, to accept that, but to never doubt that you'll prevail in the end, but to recognize and understand just how tough it will be as you go through it.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. But you've got to. I'm an optimist. I'm a realist, but I'm an optimist, and I just try to see the bright side of things and try to look at a situation that I'm going to get through this. And I will find a way to navigate these difficult waves that I'm swimming through right now and find a way to get through this. But I'm an optimist ultimately, and just try to take a deep breath, identify what the issue is, and work through that. And that's how I try to create my own resilience mechanism.
What about the demands that your career has played? I mean, you're a combat veteran. You've been mobilized throughout your career. What about like work-life balance or integration? What are some strategies that have worked for you in terms of, because that's a component of resilience, of course.
I don't think I ever got that right. I mean, I must tell you, I look back on my career and long hours going to the field for training exercises, going to a combat training center. Kumar, I will tell you, I don't think I ever got that right. And I've talked to friends of mine who mentioned the same thing, that they never got it right. I tried to make an effort, if I could, to go to my kids' events, soccer matches, Boy Scout events, Girl Scout events. I'd help my daughter sell Girl Scout cookies. I must have bought and eaten 1,000 boxes of cookies over the years. But I try to go to my kids' events when I could. Sometimes you can't. But if I was in the office doing work, and my son had a soccer match at 5:30, I would leave the office and go watch him play. And if I had to go back, I would. And if I didn't, I'd go on home. But I don't think I ever got that right. But the philosophy I tried to work toward was I would try to work at home as hard as I worked in the office, mowing the lawn, spend time with the children, playing catch with my son, kicking a soccer ball with my daughter, take my kids out for ice cream or something like that. But I tried to work toward a philosophy of working as hard at home as I do in the office. It didn't always work out that way, but I tried to reach that goal. But I must tell you, I never really got that mechanism, that balance right. And I tried hard.
So and I'm curious about that because we struggled with that in terms of my career. I mean, when I was away, my wife, Laura would set up the iPad on the dinner table so I could participate in the family meal. I would sing to the kids via iPad, for bedtime and stuff like that. But when I look at it, I see some things I might have done differently, but the requirements of the job made it very difficult. And I'm just curious, as you look back, is there anything you could have done differently?
The expectation is that you will be there and you'll get the job done as an operations officer of a battalion, as a battalion commander, a brigade XO. And you're being relied upon to get the job done, whether it's maintenance or a training plan or preparing for an exercise. And whether that takes you 24 hours to get it done, that's the expectation. And there are times that you just can't break away, as difficult as it is. And I must tell you, in this phase of my life as a consultant, one reason why I went into a consultancy and not working for a Fortune 500 company where I could make a lot more money is so I can pick and choose when I spend time with the family. My daughter had a son last summer, and my wife and I took off and drove out there for about 2 weeks. And we've been out there 4 times since. And we'll go out there again. But if I work for a major company and we had a program review coming up or a major project, my boss would say, well, Byron, we need you here because we're working on getting another contract. But one reason why I went into consultancy is so I could pick and choose the projects that I work on.
Right.
And I can meet that core value of independence and setting my own standards, deciding how I use my own time.
Well, I think you've nailed it. I mean, I like to tell people I'm working for the best boss I have ever worked for. We are 100% aligned.
That's right.
And that is the advantage, the blessing of being an independent consultant or whatever, entrepreneur, sole proprietor, whatever it may be. It is nice to have that flexibility because that was always my biggest frustration and something I still regret a little bit in terms of the demands of some of the assignments that I've had. And I'm sure, you've had incredibly demanding assignments and, the inability sometimes to be there for special occasions, that the kids still bring up, because
they do.
They may understand, but it doesn't mean that they're still not sad about it, and
that's true.
That's
true. That's right.
Well, let me ask you what's the biggest misconception about being a general officer?
People think that being a general is easy. That you ride around in a sedan all day or a Suburban, you fly around in helicopters, you go to meetings and tell people what to do, then you read the paper all afternoon, you have a cup of coffee. They think it's easy, but being a general, you don't have much control over your time. You are a senior government official. And even though you may be assigned to the 82nd Airborne or the 1st Cavalry Division, you can be sent to give a speech somewhere or lay a wreath or preside at a funeral. And that may come from the Army Secretary to go out and do something like that. But being a general is very, very difficult. And I must tell you, I applied for a position about 7 years ago, and I was not selected. I was a finalist, but I didn't get the job. And some feedback I received about a year later is that The selection committee felt that generals don't do any work. They aren't used to working. And my response to the person that told me that is, I was not always a general. I was a captain, lieutenant, a major, a colonel. So, so they think that being a general is easy. Yes, you have a lot of authority and can make decisions and have resources at your disposal, but it's not that easy. You're under the gun every day to do something for somebody, but also you can make a difference. You can make a difference in helping someone with an assignment or getting their record straight for a promotion board or what have you, and also mentor and coach. But people think that being a general is, well, you come to work at 9 o'clock in the morning and read a cup of coffee and read the paper and then get in a sedan and ride around for a little bit and then go
Yeah.
home. It's not quite that simple.
One of the things that strikes me as you say that is my classmate Jeff, who served with you in the 101st,
Oh, yes.
and he was an aide de camp, and it was in that assignment he saw the demands of that flag officer position and started to make some choices depending on based on what he wanted to, how available he wanted to be to his family. So yeah,
I will
it's
tell you,
demanding.
Jeff was on the way. He was out there when I was a brigade commander, and he had the right assignments. Was I'd say one of the top captains, if not the top captain in the entire division. But
Hmm.
you make a decision about work-life balance,
Yeah,
and you have to make a choice as to which way you want to go.
yeah. Now, one of the key positions you had served in was as Commandant of the Joint Forces Staff College. What is the mission of the Joint Forces Staff College?
Okay. Um, the mission, the short mission is that all may labor as one. Joint, multinational, multi-service, interagency. The actual mission, I just happen to have it here, is to educate national security professionals to plan and execute operational level joint, multinational, and interagency operations to instill a commitment to joint objectives, teamwork, and perspectives. Um, that was a incredible assignment for me because I had students that were from the CIA and Homeland Security. I had all 5 services. I had DA civilians. We had a few international students in most of our programs. That was a great assignment to see from an academic standpoint how we teach joint, multinational, and interagency type of coordination and planning. It was a great assignment. I enjoyed that, Kumar,
Well,
tremendously.
and it's a critical one because I mean, certainly post 9/11, I mean, we've had to kind of break down. We won't call them stovepipes; we'll call them silos of excellence. We've had to break them down and encourage, fuller information sharing. And the threat is asymmetric, and it requires, creative responses.
Mhm.
So it is really key. And I'm curious, just from an academic perspective, and also just from your practical experience, what is essential to breaking down those barriers so that you have that kind of whole of government response to whatever the challenge may be?
Everyone brings something different to the table. And I think that every player in an operation like that, whether it's disaster relief, combat operations, or peacekeeping, everyone brings something different. And every player in that effort must understand what the others can bring.
Hmm.
Um, every service or every element of the interagency brings something different. And to understand how they can all fit together most efficiently to get the job done, you must understand that. And we tried to teach that at Joint Forces Staff College. When we got there, about 90% of our student spaces were with U.S. military officers. Mostly of them were officers. And I tried to decrease that to about 75% to bring in more civilians
Mm.
from the interagency and bring in more multinational so that when a student goes through any of our programs there, they are experiencing jointness and the interagency. And you talk in class, but when you're playing golf on the weekend or basketball or going out for a run or having a beer, you're talking about what you do in your full-time life. So I try to decrease the number of U.S. bases to bring in more civilians from the interagency and also more international students. And that's how you learn about jointness. But everyone must understand what the others can bring, and then try to play to your strengths and try to mitigate those shortcomings that you may have in your particular element.
Yeah, I experienced that directly when one of my last assignments was at Europol,
Right.
and we partnered with Joint Special Operations Command,
Right.
and and the response was always, as the threat moves out of the conflict zone, the finish looks different.
It does.
It may not be a drone strike; it may be a treasury sanction.
That
It may
could be.
be
That's right.
something else. So it was really, and it was striking to see how information they developed or how information we developed, perhaps from financial subpoenas to trace financial transactions, could lead to both kinetic finishes and also law enforcement finishes.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Well, you also held leadership roles as the chief of the multinational mission in Egypt.
Yes.
You also served led the director of operations for NATO Joint Task Force.
Right.
What is the key? So this is a different element, shifting from interagency or U.S. interagency. What is the key to international partnerships? How does that change, or how does the emphasis shift when you're putting together these partnerships? Our adversaries don't respect borders, so
They don't.
we've got to figure out how to creatively operate across borders while still respecting differing sovereignties and rules of law and varying concerns. So I'm curious about that.
I must tell you, the first thing that I've always done, whether in Egypt or in Afghanistan as the chief of staff of the Combined Joint Task Force or in the NATO, treat everyone with respect. The U.S. is the biggest bill payer, usually in terms of troop strength and funding for any kind of multinational effort. But some smaller country that may contribute 10 people to the cause and no funding, they are as much a player as anyone else. And I've tried to let them know they have a seat at the table, that they are valued members of our team, that even though we pay the biggest bill, and in those assignments, I learned a lot about consensus building and a lot about collaboration because they bring something special in every case. When I was in the NATO assignment, we struggled with one particular issue that we had, but one of the lieutenant colonels on my staff had worked on the defense minister's staff in his country. And he brought in a recommendation that we adapted a little bit to fit the solution. So everyone brings something different. And my philosophy is everyone can teach me something I didn't know. Yeah. I don't care what your rank is, how much education you have. I don't care what your socioeconomic level is. Everyone can bring something different. And I try to let people know that you have a seat here. You're a valued member of our team, and we respect you and your nation and what you bring to support this particular effort. And that's how I've moved forward in all of my multinational and multi-agency type of endeavors.
All right. So we've talked about and you've shared some of your experiences as far as these specific assignments. I'd like to zoom out for a moment and ask some bigger questions. So when you look at your entire military career, what did you find most satisfying?
Wow. In general, watching people flourish, watching those who work for me, those I mentor, watching them succeed and move on to get promoted, to go on to other type of important jobs and roles. But when I watch someone who's associated with me, whether it's at West Point as attack, watching you and some of your classmates and those a year or two ahead of you, and those who were with me in my military career, when I watch them get promoted and moving on, are doing well in a different sector, I feel good about that. And one example is when I was a battalion commander, I had 5 majors who worked for me. As a 3, the XO, they all rotated through those jobs. 4 of those 5 got picked to command battalions. And for me, that is success. That's a high success rate They were all good people, and all are doing great from what I can tell at this stage of their lives. But to watch them go on to get selected for battalion level command was, to me, tremendous.
Byron, what I love about your answer is it comes right back to what you talked about from your first assignment, the two-syllable word people.
That's right.
The people, in the investment in the people and the relationships, and it's tremendously satisfying to see people flourish. I completely identify with that. Well, that's what's most satisfying. What was most frustrating when you look at the entire career?
Um, in a macro sense, watching people make mistakes that are avoidable,
Mm,
make decisions that they know are wrong. They don't do the proper, put the proper thought effort into whatever this particular task is, or action on the professional side, or it could be something personal. But when I watch someone make a decision or take an action that's avoidable, that may cause injury or loss of funds or loss of time, and that particular effort was avoidable, that frustrates me. And
mm.
I have a hard time accepting that over time. We all make mistakes. We all make honest mistakes. But there's some things that you make a decision to do something that you know is incorrect. It's unsafe. It's might be illegal in some cases. It might be against policies. But when I watch someone make a mistake and do something that's absolutely avoidable, that's on the frustrating side.
Yeah, I know the first question I always ask is when something like that happens, is this a skill problem or is this a will problem?
That's right, skill or
Because
will.
my response will be entirely different depending on what it is. um, we're gonna turn in a moment from the Army because you've done so much in the 10 years since you retired. But before we leave the Army, from your perspective now, 10 years removed, retired, but obviously still interested and passionate about the Army, what do you view as the most significant leadership challenge that the Army faces as it moves forward?
Wow. Without a question, sexual harassment slash sexual assault and extremism. We
Hmm.
have to get a handle on those. I know our Secretary of Defense has made that a priority in his first 3 months in the role as Secretary of Defense. I would say all armed forces must get a handle on sexual assault, sexual harassment, and extremism. Those are issues, probably have been for a while. And if we don't turn that around soon, it will take us decades to get that back. Yeah,
Yeah.
we can talk about budget priorities and procurement and new equipment fielding. That's important too, don't get me wrong. But those three issues affect the culture and the trust and confidence of the institution that we call the Army, that we've all served in and we all care about. But if we don't get a handle on that quickly, those are going to that's going to be real bad and difficult to turn around.
Now, you mentioned you're an optimist. Do you feel pretty positive about the course that's being charted as far as responding to that?
I do. I think that the Secretary of Defense, the two service chiefs I know personally, I know that they were serious about it in my discussions with them, and I think that there are some naysayers out there that I'm sure don't want to play ball fairly and don't want to call this what it is. But I am optimistic that we're going to get a handle on this, and I
Mhm.
think that the current Defense Secretary, the service secretaries that have been announced thus far, as well as the two service chiefs I know personally, they're going to get a handle on this, and I do believe that we're going to make it right.
Okay. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's good to hear. I
Mhm.
mean, the so pivoting from your Army career, I mean, there are some that believe that there are significant distinctions. You actually referred to it earlier, this bias that all general officers have to do once they lift their head up from the paper is issue an order, and that therefore it's easy. So that people think that there's these significant distinctions between leading in the military versus the civilian sector, but as we've shared, I mean, you not only were highly successful in the military, but you've become a consultant, an executive coach. You've sat on numerous. You continue to sit on numerous boards. So you've got a unique perspective, I think, to provide in terms of this question. How do the skills that that officers, NCOs, and anyone picks up in the military, how do the skills that you learned in the military, how do they translate to civilian life?
That's a very clear translation from being in uniform to being in the commercial sector. The skills that we learn in the armed forces are very transferable. And the four things that I learned most in uniform are how to identify and develop talent, how to build multi-dimensional teams, how to empower people appropriately with the authority to make decisions to get things done, and the importance of relationships. Those are four things I learned in the armed forces early on, and I'm still learning today, actually. But those skills translate very neatly from being in uniform to the commercial sector. Whether you're in the nonprofit world, you're an independent consultant, or whether you work for a larger company, those skills that we learn, integrity, just doing what's right every day, and being truthful, those are skills that we learned, and that translates. But the skills that I picked up in 33 years in the armed forces, those carry over to me in my commercial life as a consultant and a board member.
And you referenced a multidimensional team. What does that mean? What does multidimensional look like?
People who have different credentials that bring different skill sets. And on the board of which I'm a chair, we have two people who are information technology experts. We have an attorney that's on there. We have a financial expert, Harvard MBA, CPA, and we have a couple of retired civilians, one from the commercial sector and one from the military, from the DOD, retired SCS, and we all bring something different. So the multi-dimensions are CPA, financial expert, attorney, information technology expert with cybersecurity as a focus, senior civilians from the commercial sector. So identifying that talent and building them so your team is successful. So that's one thing I learned, because you take an infantry company, you've got signal, you've got an armorer, you probably got a medic, you probably got a fire support person there, and maybe a support person with you. So that multi-dimensional effort are the skills you bring to the table, the credentials you bring to help the team be successful.
So you referenced chairing this board. A lot of people don't really kind of fully appreciate what an advisory board does, what its function is, and how it relates to a business. Would you please share a little bit about that?
You have two kinds of boards. One is a board of directors. I'm on one of those, and a board of advisors. The board of directors provides advice to a company. They guide them, provide mentorship to the senior leaders of a company, but they have a fiduciary responsibility for the company. If the company goes bankrupt, then the board has something to do with that, because you didn't provide the right oversight. If they have a cybersecurity attack, the board didn't do what they were supposed to do in providing oversight. An advisory board provides advice. There's no responsibility to if the company should go bankrupt, or if they should fail in some reason, fail a major cybersecurity inspection. You provide advice to the president of the company, his or her leadership, provide advice on a variety of things about relationships you have with other businesses, that they can succeed in a lot better. So the boards are different, yet they're kind of the same. But the big difference between a director board and an advisory board is board of directors has financial stake with the company, and an advisory board does not. We provide advice and to the president and his team, and try to help them be successful.
So as you describe that, what strikes me is that leadership probably looks a little different, both among members of the board, but also in terms of relationship to the company or business leadership. And I would imagine, that there's a premium on influence, and well, I mean, if you could clarify, because I would think it would be kind of, there may be some sort of formal authority, but I would think that a lot of it is informal, especially among members of the board, in terms of charting a path. What would be really helpful is if you could share kind of a specific example of a success that you've influenced as the chairperson.
Okay. I joined this board in 2015, and I was the vice chair of the board. A year later, I became the chair because of chair moved on to do something else, and I became the chair. At the beginning, we had 5 board members. Now we have 9. We've had a few who've left the board for a variety of reasons, but the president and I went out and identified people that had certain skill sets: an attorney, a CPA, people with incredible IT skills, because we needed to have that resident on the board. In the last 3 years, Kumar, this company has increased their revenue by 30% and should even exceed that next year. They've got some contracts that they've got with other companies and with the government that will set them to do very well financially. But watching this company grow 30% in 3 years is phenomenal. And I think that the composition of our board, the credentials that the board members have, their relationships in other companies and in government help with that effort. But we have a high performing team now between the company leadership as well as the board members. And the president has replaced some of his senior leaders because they weren't a good fit. And a lot of that was done at the advice of board members.
Okay.
They know people that have got other skills that can come in and help and would fit and help our company improve. But it's a great job to watch and to be a part of, to watch our success the past 30 or 36 months. And I'm glad to be a part of a team like this that's succeeding. They're making lots of money. And I think we've got the right board in place now to help us move on and do better in the long term.
You know, once again, I mean, the theme that keeps resonating is this focus on people, finding and developing the right talent. You talked about putting together this high performing team. So, you know, based on your experience, both in the military and as chairman of the advisory board, how do you build a diverse and inclusive and a high performing team?
You've got to identify the right talent, and you've got to use word of mouth, LinkedIn in some cases, identify those that are not known to you, but you vet them properly, and you bring a team together, and everyone understands what their role is on the team. If you're a lawyer, you kind of bring maybe not a general counsel experience, but you can provide some legal advice to us in making a decision. If you're an expert in cybersecurity, you can tell us how best to protect the company's information so that they are successful. But we identify talent by word of mouth when we have a board seat, and then we go through an onboarding process to make sure they know that they're welcome. They know what the rules are. They understand what the standards are in meeting attendance and follow-ups if they require to provide response on something. And also, I sit down with each team member and identify objectives and goals that they can work toward. And they know what those goals are. And I try to have someone coach this new leader. It could be a board member, or it could be another, a regular military type job, that they are coached and that they have mentorship to walk through the duties that they're assigned to do and be successful. But I think that onboarding someone in the commercial sector, when they're coming to a company, that they know what the standards are, that you sit down with them and identify some appropriate objectives, some goals that they can work toward, so they know what their duties are for the greater team. And then you assess moving forward. So that's those are some things that I have done in the past to kind of help us be successful.
Hmm. Well, you had also earlier you had referenced relationships as one of your four, and we in my coaching company we use the Lencioni model
Mhm.
for just one model that's useful in terms of building a high performing team. The foundation being trust, and I'm curious as to what is your strategy for forming high trust relationships among the board members?
Be transparent and share information when you can share it, unless something is classified or some confidential personal action. I share as much as information as I can, so everyone knows what's going on, and they aren't believing that we're hiding something or we're trying to not share everything with them. But I try to share as much as I can, and I try to ensure that my words and actions match, that my
Mhm.
audio and my video are the same. So
Yeah.
when I'm saying something about meeting attendance or attire for a meeting, that I've got to live, I've got to lead by example, basically. So for
Yeah.
me, it's that my words and my actions match, and I try to learn as much as I can about them. What are their challenges? Are they having any personal issues? Are they having uh, a health problem with a loved one at home that they might need some understanding as time goes on? But I try to get to know them and share with them that I'm there to help them in any way possible. But transparency, that my words and actions match, and I try to get to know them, that I care about them as a person. And one more thing while we're on that topic, I try to show a passion for what I do and the compassion for those I lead. If
Hmm.
you don't care about someone, you can't lead them, and they
Right.
will know. They will see right through that. So I try to have a passion for what I do in my job, whether board chair or a nonprofit board member or what have you, and then a compassion for those I lead.
Yeah. Your response is just completely resonating. When I coach around building trust in the workplace, we talk about four factors: sincerity, reliability, competence, and care. Sincerity being meaning what you say, saying what you mean, and walking your talk. And then care, obviously, if people don't think you have their interests in mind when you're making a decision, you don't have
That's
trust.
right.
And so you're definitely amplifying and foot stomping those points.
That's right.
Well, let me. We're kind of winding down.
Okay.
What did you believe at the beginning of your career that you feel differently about now?
Wow. That's a great question. When I first came in the Army, I felt that you were promoted or advanced based totally on performance, 100% on performance. And I learned early on that it's about relationships and having a cadre of mentors who can kind of help guide you through a career, help you learn about the Army, help you understand the kind of assignments to get. And it's about being connected to someone who can kind of, I don't want to say give you a job, but someone who can advise you what the best job is to go to at that time in your career. But I felt early on, Kumar, that getting promoted and advanced was based totally on performance. Now, that's a big part of it, don't get me wrong, but you make that extra 15% by relationships and having good mentors that can help guide you
Yeah.
and coach you through to higher success.
Yeah, I think when we're young, it's very easy to kind of think, well, this is just all. I remember my father giving me the advice you just said, and me saying, "Dad, I'm good. I'll make my own way. I'll make my own way." And you are so right in terms of the importance of mentoring that creates opportunities and relationships and learning. I can't emphasize that enough to the people that I encounter in terms of finding a tribe of mentors, not just one either. Just a kitchen cabinet you can reach out for to help you, connect you with opportunities, and help you solve problems.
That's right.
Well, if you had to boil down your leadership philosophy then to a few just key critical essentials, what would they be?
Okay, great question to end up on, Kumar. I'll tell you, the first thing that I tell any leader when I'm coaching him or her, or when I'm trying to help a leader in the commercial sector, you got to know who you are. If you don't are not self-aware, if you don't know yourself, you can't lead anybody else. You got to know what your strengths are, what are your shortcomings, what are you doing to mitigate those? So first is knowing who you are. Respect and value all people, no matter what their military rank, what kind of car they drive, what kind of their level of in the socioeconomic scale. Respect and value all people. They're human beings. And last, I would say leaders must act with integrity. Do what's right, regardless of what your personal feelings are. You've got to do what's right. You may be a decision maker and you may feel one way, but the right decision may be something else. So those are the things that I would give you about my leadership philosophy, and they've guided me for almost 40 years now, and those are things I've kind of stuck with, Kumar.
I appreciate that. Yeah. Well, where can our listeners learn more about you and B&B Solutions?
Okay, look me up on LinkedIn, Byron .s.bagby. Connect with me on LinkedIn, and we can chat. I'd like to learn more about what you do. So connect with me on LinkedIn. That's the best way to connect with me. And when we can hopefully talk and maybe come, share ideas, and you can teach me something that I didn't know.
Yeah. Well, Byron, thank you for sharing your lessons learned from a 33-year military career and your continued civilian leadership in the decade since you retired from military service. And most importantly, thank you for the many sacrifices you've made in service to this nation, but also, kind of returning to the principle you identified at the very beginning, your investment in people, and more personally, your investment in me. So thank you very much.
Well, you're welcome. Thanks for inviting me, Kumar. Thank you very much.